Welcome to episode 44 of Full Throttle, the Presidio Group's automotive industry podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stein, Managing Director at Presidio. On a regular basis, Full Throttle serves as the industry's meeting point for great, insightful conversations with leaders across the automotive world.
Here's a situation where they've decided, they being Volkswagen AG, has decided to compete with their own dealer network, a dealer network that has carried them through tough times. You know, the Audi acceleration issue, we had Dieselgate, we've had trouble with the ID4 recently. As you know, Jason, dealers make massive investments in their communities, in their facilities, in the land, and in their people, and then to go and decide to compete directly with them with product that they've been looking for decades. So just a very frustrating situation.
If anyone has their hands full with industry dynamics, it's NADA President and CEO Mike Stanton. It's not just tariffs that are on his radar. Long before the administration took a hard line on auto tariffs, he was taking a hard line with direct sales. And squarely in his purview is the idea of protecting the relationship between the franchise dealer and its partnership with automakers. That means direct sales competitors such as Scout have risen to the forefront of all conversations within Washington and around the country. Today, we sit down with Mike to talk about NADA's point of view on tariffs and its stance on direct sales. We also dive into the results of a recent study commissioned by NADA around direct selling methods. The results of that research won't surprise you, but the context and math around it all are illuminating, especially because of the strength of the dealer model. There's plenty to discuss with the person leading the conversations with dealers across the industry. Today, we get to hear it directly. It's Mike Stanton on Full Throttle.
Hi, I'm Mike Stanton, and this is Presidio's podcast, Full Throttle.
Mike, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. We meet in some unusual places. Toronto was recently, and of course, we bumped into each other in the snow in New Orleans. But good to have you on the program.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me.
Let's start off with you being maybe a little bit in the news. NADA sent a strongly worded letter to Volkswagen Group CEO Oliver Blume and other key executives about Scout Motors. Tell me a little bit about that. Take us up to speed, or bring us up to speed, rather, on where we are on your letter dated March 6th that basically was about the dealership franchise system.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we sent the letter out. It made its way to automotive news. So yes, we did make news. That was not necessarily the intention. The goal was to have a conversation with Dr. Blume, and we had reached out before with a letter sent probably 8-9 months ago that went unresponded to. We've had several conversations with Scott Keogh, with the U.S. management at VW, at Porsche, and at Audi. And we felt like we were getting the runaround for a couple of years. And then Scout made the decision to go direct. And I guess I wasn't surprised because we weren't getting a lot of information out of anyone, but very disappointed the way it was announced. And just the whole, I guess, their whole process. It's not something that I would characterize as a trusting relationship, to get the runaround like we got. And this situation is very different than a Tesla, a Lucid, or a Rivian. Here's a situation where they've decided, they being Volkswagen AG, has decided to compete with their own dealer network, a dealer network that has carried them through tough times. The Audi acceleration issue, we had Dieselgate, we've had trouble with the ID4 recently. As you know, Jason, dealers make massive investments in their communities, in their facilities, in the land, and in their people, and then to go and decide to compete directly with them with product that they've been looking for decades. So just a very frustrating situation. And we know that there are lawsuits that are starting to appear in several states. NADA, is my guess, will support those lawsuits from a financial perspective. But we thought it made sense to try and have a meeting and see if we can get something done before going down this legal path. But unfortunately, that's where it looks like it's headed. And we've yet to hear back on the letter that we sent.
You offered to meet at Bloom's office in Wolfsburg. You said you'll meet in Tyson's, Virginia at your office. You'll meet somewhere in between. And like you said, no response. So ultimately, it goes to a legal process, right?
I think that's where it's headed,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And
Yeah.
there are dealers that have already challenged this in Florida.
Right. Right. Um, there are numerous dealers, and we've talked to some of them on this program who just on the Volkswagen side who don't understand themselves exactly what's happening here. Distributing Scout in the United States, competing directly with a dedicated dealer body. Um, what's your read on maybe the lack of understanding, perhaps, that's coming out of Wolfsburg?
Well, it could be arrogance. It could be that they just made a decision that they were going to do something back when at a time when maybe it looked appealing. Maybe it's a Tesla copycat. I mean, in a way, Jason, we've seen this time and time again over the years. In a way, if they would just listen, we would be saving them from themselves because manufacturers do not know how to retail cars. And for Volkswagen AG and Scout to think that they can do it better or for less money than a dealer network is just misguided. It's just not the truth. And some of the things I've been listening to them say, they've had hearings down in South Carolina. They're just not telling the truth.
Yeah. Um, in fact, Scott Keogh, who we know well and has been a friend of the dealer body when he was the head of Audi and also Volkswagen, he said on Motor Trend's Inevitable podcast recently that the brand in Scout does not have a dealer network, did not have a dealer network. They have a brand that's 100% startup and allows you to make decisions that startups can make. So almost don't look over here, right? Where's it funded by? But no, it's a startup.
Yeah,
Those two things can't exist.
they can't exist. That doesn't make any sense to me, but that's why you have to go to the court to let the judges decide.
Right. In a related, I guess, topic, there was an Oliver Wyman study released last fall that looked at direct to consumer and hybrid sales models and basically determined that the traditional franchise dealership model is the most cost effective way to distribute vehicles. NADA commissioned that study. What was the impetus for NADA to have that research done?
Well, in my gut, I always knew when you just think about the investments that dealers make in their facilities, the land, their employees, it's such a high touch business with consumers. So my gut told me that the entrepreneur is going to do that much better than some corporate entity. But we had some corporate entities that were talking about their distribution system as being a $2,000 or $3,000 per vehicle cost disadvantage compared to a direct model. So while my gut told me that can't be the case, we thought it best to commission a study and then let the facts speak for themselves. And when you look at the study, and you have to, there's conflation of a bunch of things out there. I mean, you cannot. A marketing strategy is much different than a distribution strategy. If you decide, like a Tesla, to only build a certain number of models and just a few colors, there's not a lot of variability there. With someone like a BMW, where there is maximum flexibility in what kind of car or SUV you can configure. So you have to separate those two things, and then you need to take a close look at, okay, where are the real costs? And we looked at that, or had our consultants looked at it. It was their process. It was our data. We used 20 Group information, but there was nothing in the process that a direct to consumer model that they didn't have to do that the franchise dealer has to do today. So it's really, when you looked at compared apples to apples from a cost perspective, it was very close. But what no one talked about before this study was the value, and quantify the value that the dealer brings to the equation. The dealer, the customer, every deal, every car purchase is unique. There could be a trade-in. There's a circumstances can be different with the credit There's cash buyers, there's lease buyers, people want to finance the vehicle. The dealer brings value in that they know their local market the best, they know their customer the best, and the dealer will put together and that transaction and put the customer in the vehicle that they need in the budget that they can afford. It's a very high touch business. So when you factor in the value of what the dealers bring, manufacturer's going to sell more cars. They're going to have happier customers. And it was nice to be able to prove that with a third party study.
Were you surprised by any of the study's findings?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, and it's not like I had it all figured out. As I mentioned, my gut told me that this would be the case because dealers compete. They're killing each other to win a customer's business, and when dealers compete, prices are lower. And so, not really, but it was nice to have the amount of data, the quantity of the information, really to take that discussion off the table. And we don't have our current manufacturers, our legacy OEMs, they're talking about their dealers as a competitive advantage in the marketplace. I don't hear anything about cost. And remember, when all this noise was in the system, this is back during COVID when we couldn't get enough cars to meet consumer demand. So, our business changes very quickly, and that's what was happening back then. I don't know. I certainly didn't believe that we would be into some kind of magical just-in-time situation. It's just not the way our industry works. We're very competitive. A lot of manufacturer pressure from an inventory perspective, and that ultimately is good for the consumer.
How has NADA used the study results since it was released? And related, has it been helpful in any of your interactions with automakers or in any legal or legislative efforts on behalf of franchise dealers?
Yeah, the place where it's been, I think, the most productive is that now we can go have a conversation with our car company partners and let's talk about this and put the numbers down. We've had some really good in-depth conversations rather than talk about $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Let's talk about the mechanics of how these dollars were how they came about, because we would hear numbers with no backup. Now we've had the backup. So NADA engages with every manufacturer at least twice a year. What this study has done, along with what we did a couple years back on our guiding principles for the future of automotive retail, it's enabled us to have a higher level strategic discussion with our OEM partners.
Where do you see further risk to franchise dealers from established OEMs as they perhaps launch or consider new brands or even distribution models?
I believe in controlling what you can control. So to me, the only risk is that the franchise dealers don't continue to get better. And we've seen it. Their sales satisfaction scores are better than they've ever been. And we just need to continue to focus on the customer doing what we do best, and also having a relationship with our car companies that's one of mutual trust, where they focus on building a great car and we focus on delivering a great customer experience, because that's all a customer cares about. Their experience, were they treated well? Was it transparent? A great product? The rest of it doesn't matter to the customer. And I think the manufacturers and dealers that are going to do best in the future are going to be the ones that are having a trusting relationship with a lot of back and forth conversation. There'll be disagreements, but I think that's healthy. That's healthy disagreement as long as we are focused on the customer rather than shifting costs.
There's obviously, experimentation, especially with direct to consumer or agency or hybrid distribution models, clearly top of mind for dealers who are worried about future distribution in automotive retailing. As you said, this subject came up repeatedly a few years ago. In addition to direct or agency distribution, are there other potential disruptive forces that you and maybe the board are worried about?
So the word agency and really the direct to consumer, these were things being talked about a couple years ago, with the exception of Scout and the Afila brand. And I do think that those situations are going to work themselves out. When I think about kind of the concerns for the future, it's just the evolving consumer and the marketplace, and making sure that we at least keep pace. Better yet, we need to be a couple of steps ahead, and many dealers are. Many dealers are doing some incredibly innovative things to take care of what is a very complex, transaction. So, as I mentioned before, I don't tend to worry too much about those which we can't control. We can certainly control the customer experience within the four walls of the dealership, and then the digital experience as well.
Can't control what's happening in Washington, D.C. at an administration level, and an ever-moving target on tariffs. At the time of this taping, we're mostly off the table with automotive. Where's NADA stand on all of that?
Well, you're right, Jason, and you can't control, but we have a lot of influence. We've built some very good relationships with our lawmakers over the years. It's a time of enthusiasm and optimism with the new administration. We have Bernie Moreno, a former car dealer, that's also got our back and our voice in the Senate. I would say dealers right now, while there's some uncertainty around tariffs, I don't think it's overplayed. Certainly not like it was in Canada when we were up there a month or so ago.
Yeah,
I think the dealers are optimistic. They're happy about the FTC and the rule that did not go through, thanks to the TADA and NADA. That rule was vacated in the Fifth Circuit, excuse me. So we're out of the business of the government telling us how to sell cars. And now what we got to knock out are these CARB waivers and the whole EV mandates. And there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm, optimism that we're going to be in a much better place in the coming months with regard to the government mandating, what we have to sell. So if we're not under the pressure of how to sell and what to sell, things start to look a lot more optimistic. Now the tariffs, hopefully, we got to give the administration some space. Hopefully that's a short-term situation. The NADA often, and I think it's most effective, we work behind the scenes. We've had a call with the policy folks over at the White House, and we're talking to them about these tariffs don't just hurt the auto manufacturers. They could hurt, Main Street, small and medium-sized businesses as well, and they will if these go prolonged, and the consumer too. So that being said, we're keeping a low profile on it, and we're trying to be in the education space, advisory space, but certainly trying to influence, because that's one of our core missions, is to try and influence and create good outcomes for dealers.
Always great to be with you, Mike. Thanks so much for the update on everything, and look forward to seeing you probably at the New York show.
Great. See you soon, Jason.
Great. Thank you. That's our 44th episode of Full Throttle, and a big thanks to my guest, NADA President and CEO, Mike Stanton. Thank you for listening. Just a reminder, you can watch this episode and all others on YouTube. Please like and subscribe in order to see a library of these episodes. And of course, you can go to thepresidiogroup.com for more information. I'm your host, Jason Stein. We'll talk to you again next time.